I just have two questions to our speakers. The first one to Dina. And Dina, she mentioned that you mentioned about the blood, which is phenomenon of the Soviet time, yes. And did you, in your research, did you did you pay attention to the new phenomenon of the post-Soviet time, which is also corruption and which we called in Russian откаты? Yes, nobody mentioned about this. And did you make just some research on this in your investigation, I don't know, in your research project? And the first question, and the second question to Scott, that you mentioned 3 types of theories, yes? And what kind of theory you can apply to our situation in our Kazakhstan, according to corruption issues?
Well, as I said, I think you can combine those sort of cultural approaches with the rational actor approach. But I think generally speaking, the rational actor approach sort of incorporates the cultural approach when it comes to the idea of fighting corruption. One thing that interested me in Natalie's presentation was that she suggested that people should just stop engaging in this type of behavior, and that if people did that, then the situation could be solved, but it does exist. And that she also mentioned that a number of people had been arrested and punished for engaging in corrupt behavior, and that sort of fits in with the notion first that there is sort of an environment that allows for this type of behavior. That would be sort of the cultural approach in a way, but also that you can take concrete steps to change that environment by, for example, increasing the costs associated for engaging in this type of behavior and reducing the benefits. I mean, that was the implication, I think, of her argument towards the end, that you protest when you're asked for to give a bribe or something like that. And that's a cost-benefit type of argument, it seems to me. Right? So to increase the cost for people engaging in this type of behavior by turning them in, say, to the authorities or something of that nature. Hua's argument in terms of that matrix is, in his opinion, I agree with that, applicable across different cultures. Everyone has a degree of rationality associated with their actions. We all do things for reasons. And we usually, because we think it will benefit us, or we engage in an activity because we think it will benefit us or benefit someone that's close to us or something of that nature. And if those benefits outweigh the potential punishments or costs or something, then people sometimes will engage in this type of behavior. You don't have to, in other words, you don't have to change the culture so much as you have to change the incentive structure. That argument leaves out the sort of cultural context, I guess you would say. So it should work everywhere. I find the argument kind of convincing because it worked in Singapore, which had a corruption problem, a very serious corruption problem. It's one of the most corrupt polities in the world. And within a couple of decades, they completely reversed it. And now are have one of the cleanest polities in the world. Now, there are other things to take into consideration, too. I think that is, say, the level of per capita income. If you take a look at all of the countries that rank sort of high in terms of clean government and things like that, they're all relatively wealthy. On the other hand, you can still increase the cost and benefits associated with this type of behavior. And maybe a better example in that respect would be the country of Georgia, one of the most corrupt countries in the world just, say, 10 years or so. And now, I think the last time I looked at Transparency International's ratings, it was rated like one of the 33 most clean polities in the world. How did they manage that in such a short period of time? I think they took that sort of cost-benefit approach that Kwa was advocating and implemented it in Georgia. If it worked in Georgia, I think it would work anywhere. But as Kwa emphasizes, you have to have the political will to do that, and that starts at the top. Without that commitment on the part of your political leadership to deal with this problem, it's not going to get solved. I don't know if that answers your question. That's the way I see it.
All right, thank you for the question. No, in my research, I did not focus on kickbacks, and you're absolutely right that it's a new phenomenon exactly that emerged after the breakup of the Soviet Union, the introduction of market reforms. Because my research mostly focused on two sections, that's healthcare sector and housing. And in housing, I looked at how people, whether people use blood, whether people use connections, and whether they pay bribes or give bribes in order to get apartment at the expense of the state. You know, the people who participated in this public programs of the distribution of housing state program, and whether access to this program was kind of corrupt or not. And I want to say that in healthcare, the rate of informal payments was much higher than in the housing section, because people, and this is, I think, one of the achievements of our state, the government, that not many people were involved in corrupt actions when they tried to get public housing. Because the criteria were quite strict, criteria were clear, everything was done through the e-government, so I mean it was transparent, but it does not mean that there was no corruption. There were still people who paid $1,000, $2,000 in order to get an apartment as soon as possible. There were people who used their family members or friends in order to, their documents to be considered sooner. Why do we have corruption? Because people need it, to some extent. You know that none of the countries can get rid of corruption completely. Corruption exists in the United States, in France, everywhere. It's just a matter of degree, right? It's a matter of degree. A lot or small. So, I don't know, maybe in Scandinavian states it's almost zero, but in many industrial countries it still exists. So it's a matter of degree, to my view. So, even, I mean, in housing there was corruption. There were people who used these connections still, and in the healthcare too. So I mostly did my research focusing on this, grassroots level and everyday life of people, how they deal with state officials, rather than with, kickbacks, because I think that it's already, it's a relationship between the state and business. It's a little bit different sphere, and you also, I guess, should have connections in order to get access to high-ranked officials and businessmen. Yeah. But I also wanted to add a little bit about this kind of theory. That there was an interesting research done by the High School of Economics in Moscow about the level of corruption, and they used aggregate data, the rate of corruption among the law enforcement bodies. There was Latvia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and some other states. And they wanted to see if their salary, an important predictor of the corruption. And it was shown that whether you have low salaries or high, that does not matter, in fact. And their conclusion, they didn't make conclusions, is that something else is important. And what is something else? Exactly values. Values, culture, the context, and values. But you know that values change very slowly. And how much time it might take, maybe we should follow the Georgian example, I don't know whether we can do. But I'm not sure that they completely eradicated corruption in Georgia.
No.
We will not.
Thank you.
Okay, did I have another question? Then Jacques.
Okay.
And what?
I'd love to have a very short comment. I'm talking, basically referring to Scott was saying. Historically, it was believed that Soviet corruption was inherited from Russian Empire, and it was very corrupt because it was huge. So geographically very huge, and so local governors, authorities, everybody would have less control, supervision, and quite, I don't know, big power there. If you would read Russian literature, there's always some corrupt local governor. So when we usually some discussions when they compare Singapore and Kazakhstan, when they try to implement, for example, anti-corruption regulation, they say, but Singapore is basically a city. It's very tiny. Georgia is probably also small, now de facto even smaller. So in Kazakhstan it's problematic maybe because it's huge. We have some regional and sub-regional and owl, and sometimes in order to drive to some village, you need some 3 hours, 2 hours in some cases a day. So this is, I don't know, one of the things people usually say because we're too big. Scandinavia is doing well because they're small, relatively speaking. Maybe Norway is 1/3 of Kazakhstan by population. So maybe this, in addition to cultural aspect, there's also probably the geographic aspect as well. I don't know, of course, with modern transportation, communication, how relevant is this? Just reflecting on maybe there is the other thing, which is not high salary. But
Canada, Australia, I mean,
yes, but for example, I mean, Canada and Australia is probably too, but there's also, again, talking about Singapore, they say it's a British colony. China has to be very harsh because it's huge. They have to really execute people because it's huge and so hierarchically dispersed, but there's also maybe referring to cultural aspect. Being British colony maybe is easy for Singapore. And Canada as well, right? And Canada is relatively small as well by population.
I'm not a question, just a comment. All the problems with corruption refer to the vision of what is human nature, whether it is good or bad. The legalist approach which was employed in Georgia and Singapore was actually based on the assumption that human nature is bad. Therefore, in order to make someone good, we have to, first of all, find what is bad, and then, of course, try to punish him for being bad to make him good. The Kazakhstani approach is based on the fact that the human nature is good. Therefore, we have to persuade, and what is good? It is actually an assumption that people want to be good. They want, even if they are not good, they want to be good, and therefore, for the goodness, they have to pay. If they're not so beautiful, we can first of all use cosmetics, and at the same time pay to be recognized as most beautiful. Therefore, this is the reason why we cannot eradicate corruption in Kazakhstan. We will never, because for Kazakhstan, for Kazakh culture, publicity works first and most important. Therefore, to be recognized as someone good, you have to be the fighter for corruption, at the same time to be the first one to come with something to be recognized that you are the best one. This is my comment.
well, Kazakhstani approach is to focus on small fish, so people who accept
Yes,
liquids
actually,
and
exactly.
cognac.
But it is actually human nature. You want to be like this or that.
Yeah. Okay. So you have 2 comments. Can I ask actually a question to Natalia? The first question is, okay, basically from what I understood, you want to have a society based on these market exchanges, proper market exchanges. So I do a payment and then I get a service and I don't pay anything extra. Yeah. What about human relations, like and feeling of gratitude, for example? Yeah. You give a gift to the doctor. Not because you need the service, but because you are grateful, or to the teacher. Yeah. Okay. Of course, you can give it so the teacher treats decently your kid. Yeah. But it can be also really genuine gratitude for all the care that the person put into taking care of your kid. That's one comment. If you want to, if you can. Talk about that. And the second is about transparency. Transparency is a good thing, but how much transparency do we need? For example, on the issue of, there was a recent article in The Economist about making public everybody's tax payments. Yeah. On the one hand, transparency, full transparency, everybody can look and so on. On the other hand, that's a private. They can be considered as private information, so it sort of infringes on your privacy. Yeah? So maybe you don't want people to know. Yeah? Do you have the right to keep this information private or not? Where is this borderline? Is there borderline? Yeah? Okay.
There is borderline. I start with the second question. Well, when we speak about transparency and tax payment and declaration, etc., we speak about public officials. if you want to be in politics, if you want to serve your state, you have to publish everything. And every citizen has right to know how much do you get salary, what house you have, what is the source of getting, I don't know, good car or something like that. So it's our right. We are taxpayer, and we have to know.
What about
that.
normal people? Because
Normal people, nobody will know about that. Only if the court will ask and agree with them. I don't know. If somebody go to the court and say, I need this information, the judge will say, okay, so you will be, you will have to present this information.
in Norway, for example, I think they publish everything.
No. No, only public officials, of all levels, public officials, only of all levels.
In what country?
In Kazakhstan.
No, in Norway, I mean.
In Norway.
And there is a debate whether
This was a matter of I don't know, a public agreement or a social agreement between citizens and the government. They
So
agreed
you would draw the
to be-
borderline there. the
So,
public
it's okay. If they decide so, it's okay. And going back to, regarding gratitude, write a card for your teacher. Say thank you. Why? For example, give flowers. Why do you need to buy a very expensive and not very expensive cognac or champagne?
Flowers
Why?
will.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. You know, it's about why do you decide for the teacher that flower is bad?
No, nobody.
No. It's about this because our citizens decided for themselves that our teacher will be not very happy to get her flowers. Let's give her a TV set. Oh, I don't know.
He said nobody can.
It's okay
Yeah.
for when you graduate from the school, so it's okay. Parents, I don't know, got the money and buy something very expensive for the teacher. It's okay in our schools. Why do you decide? It's okay, it's culture. We need to start all these processes. We can speak entirely about culture, about changing the violence, about changing the system. It's endless process. But you need to start about that. For me, it's I don't know. I never paid doctors, and it's okay for me. He gets salary. If he agreed for this low salary, it's his decision. I'm not going to, I don't know, crying for him or something like that. It's his decision to be in this place.
Okay.
Can we just interject?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that Natalia raised this issue also, that we are paying taxes, but maybe we also should differentiate between the oil exporting countries, right? So you know that if we compare taxes that we pay in Kazakhstan, which is 10% income tax, compared to Germany 40%, or Scandinavian countries 50 to 60%, poor Depardieu had to pay 70%, right? I mean, whether he's poor or not, but still. So I think that in this case, whether it is also relevant and correct to compare Kazakhstan with Singapore. Again, Singapore is not, oil exporting country, so probably the dynamics are different. You know this, again, this resource curse disease argument, right? No taxation, no representation. I mean, I'm sorry, 10% it's not that much. And we have a flat rate taxation.
Amount of representation too.
Exactly, exactly. And then if there is small amount of representation, then these politicians are not responsible, to combat corruption, right? And that is why, people for taking slippers, slippers, or I know that one veterinarian was also arrested because he was given 2,000 tenge and he was put in jail almost. And he had to give another bribe to the law enforcement not to get into the prison. So, I mean, really, so I think that we also should think about whether we compare oranges and apples, or cucumbers, whatever. So Singapore, I mean, it's a great dream. great country. I've been there, nice, cute, small. We know that it's very easy also to create democracy in small countries, geographical, as to what Jean mentioned. But I think that we also have to remember, how much we pay to our politicians, to the state, and what we get back. But that everything should start with us, I agree, of course, with that.
How much we pay to the teachers? That's a very interesting question.
Yes, and I just wanted to say that, for instance, when I did research, I argued that state retrenchment and that state now does not offer those services that it was during the Soviet period forces people to pay. Why parents have to pay, for instance, to make renovation? Because our education is to some extent under-subsidized. Although you can, of course, argue that now government pays lots of money, right? Yeah, but whether this money goes to these schools, another issue.
Education is well subsidized. The question is that part of these some kind of allocations are in the ministries, then they come in some kind of descending order, and finally what the teachers get. But all the parents want their children to get A or some kind of B grades. If this pupil doesn't fit all these requirements, but the teachers complain, the teacher has to put, but she needs some kind of moral compensation for the fact that she is deviating from specific standards of fairness or maybe anything else. That's normal. I have many friends who are teachers, and they complain that something like that, but his mother wants him to have 5. That is normal grading system. And she puts 5, but she says, I'm morally actually very exhausted and physically too, I'm demoralized. They didn't bring me something to sweeten me. That's what the morale of a teacher.
No, it's awful actually, because it's a teacher
It's normal,
who
I think it is
educated our
normal.
children, yes?
Normal.
And unfortunately, we have to accept that this teacher exists. It's a shame of us.
No, it is normal, it is normal.
I have another example. Last year we had approbation of our new school textbook, Anti-Corruption for Pupils, and we visited 10 schools of Almaty. It's well equipped. Principals and the teachers want to be, they actually try to do something better for pupils. And I talked also to parents, differently, separately from teachers, and we gathered them in different places. I talked to parents, I talked to teachers separately, I talked to pupils, I talked to students at school. And everybody, they said, so first of all, they are really against corruption. They don't want to get any gifts. They end up with flowers, and that is okay because not 100%, about 70% of our respondents answered us that nothing. So they only give. They allow themselves it's flowers, and now teacher just asked, don't give us I don't know. Get special flowers, yes. Just give us grounded.
Даже какие-то потёмкинские школы вы посещали?
No, it's Dostik 48 school. It's a school in a center of Almaty. Kalinina. Well,
Саша, вы пошли туда. You went there as the chairman of this Transparent International. That's the reason
well,
why
it's your decision to be corrupt. I can't change it, okay? And it's your decision to be corrupt, to
Don't use
accept
you
this
or me. First of all, we have to
lifestyle.
be neutral to each other. We have to be neutral.
Okay,
Neutral,
I'm glad
neutral.
to have such a spirited discussion. Let's give a round of applause to the panel, and then move there. We have a coffee break, and it's not a gift. It's not a
Anyway, it can be not
Let's have a gratitude for you coming here.